Okay guys, so a very quick brief on the F5 and planning for the F5. It's a bit of a dull presentation, I'm sorry to say. It's just purely slides, perhaps a bit of flying at the end. So nothing super flash, but it should be useful. The F5 planning is very, very similar for most other jets. Actually, there's not much difference, so it should give you an idea for other jets. I might do other presentations for other jets and other stuff as well. So anyway, just without further ado, going on, what we have got is a very general layout, and always with planning, what you can do is you can do planning. You then need to calculate the stuff from your plan and then refine it and then plan. And I think that's the same with all planning. Doesn't matter what. Start off very, very high level and then slowly refine and get things better. And that's really the plan here. Pun not intended. You need the manual, you need the F-5E manual. This one's published in 1978. That's got all the charts in. And I won't go through the flow diagram here, but there is a route through the planning, which is essentially calculate all the figures of the jets, then go and determine some stuff that doesn't change that much, then the fuel, and then you, from that point, you can start to refine with various other points. So that's what we're going to do. In terms of what we're going to compare it to and what we're going to plan for, it's going to be a very simple sortie. Just launch from Nellis down in the bottom right here. Then we're going to route up 5 to 6 and then up to 10 apart test range. Won't even worry about landing. We're going to take a bit of a fuel load, fuel centerline tank, Mark 82 snake eyes on the inboard pylons, empty outboard pylons, and then aim 9s on the wingtips. We'll transit at 10,000 feet and assume it's a standard day, which is an atmospheric thing, which I can talk to you about in comments or do a separate video on, but leave for the minute, and then we'll transit about map 0.6, about 350 knots. So that's the flight plan. First thing we're going to do is look at the weights. Obviously weight's going to have an impact really because of the lift drag that you've got going on with the jet. You've got to remember the internal and external fuel, so do remember that. And also remember pylons. Pylons do have weight, so you've got to include that. And I think that's pretty much it. You just find this page of the weight data within the manual, and then you just add it up so you can go through and you find where the centerline pylon is. You go, okay, it's 170 pounds, stick that in. Fuel tank, 1,553 pounds, blum, 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 and stick them all in. And again, remember the pylons, and we end up with a rate of just under £20,000, which is about right. No internal fuel for the DCS is £4,511, so it might be worth just making a note of that somewhere, because we're going to need that for working out how much fuel you're going to have left when you land. Okay, so that's the weight. The other thing is the drag, and most, I think all jets that I know, they work off a drag index, so they just normalize all of the drag calculations to make things simpler. And again, you just add up the drags, different for each jet. They tend to have a different approach. In the F5, what we have is we've got the wingtip station, so we add up the drag for the wingtip, which is 10 for the aim 9s on pylons. Center line, look up here. The difficulty, or not difficulty, but here it's slightly different. You've got an inboard station, an outboard station. So you've got to go and look around and say, well, actually on the outboard station we have a pylon. Yeah, and on the inboard station we've got Mark 82 snake eyes. So that's a drag index of 70. And you add them up and we've got a drag index of 102. The reason it's done in this way, just as a point of note, is you get interference, you get vortices coming off each one of the pylons, each one of the stores, and hence that very slightly changes how the jet behaves. And again, the drag index doesn't mean anything by itself. You need it with the other numbers. It's just a number. It's just a scalar number if you want to be technical. So we've now got the weight, we've got the drag index, and now we can really start thinking about what are we going to do, how are we going to go and plan this. And the first thing we need to do is work out bingo and joker. So bingo is the amount of fuel it's going to take to return home and land with enough for a divert. And so the furthest distance we are from the airbase is 65 miles, which is represented by the red rings over on the right here, and we're going to plug that in a moment. Let's not worry about the startup fuel for the F5, it's not that much. And then taxiing, we burn about £18 per minute according to manual for taxi. Let's assume a 3-minute taxi. It's only £54. Again, I mean, it's like 1% of your total fuel load, a bit over 1%. So again, not a huge amount. Engine run up for when you're standing on the brakes on the runway. Let's not worry about that. Again, all of this stuff you can refine if you really are very concerned about whether you can not fuel or not. You can start adding assumptions and numbers in for that. For disengaging, what you need to do is you need to work out how much fuel it's going to take to accelerate to run away. So that you can actually look up from a chart, but take 158 pounds at sea level, Mach 0.8. it's not going to be far off from that. So 150, 160 pounds. And then you're going to have 5 minutes of combat flight to disengage, to run away from whoever's attacking you. Or whatever is attacking you, if it's a SAM, and that works out to be about £790. So overall, your total Joker will be about £948. So if you remember, bingo is the amount of fuel to get from where you are to land with enough reserve, and then Joker is enough fuel on top to disengage from whatever you're doing. And we'll always assume that landing reserve is 1,000. Now, pretty much you can take those numbers and use them for every flight plan you want to do. They are not going to change that much. Again, you can refine it, but as your first brush, then it's probably pretty good. Okay, right, we're now going to go and think about the flight itself. The first thing we're going to do is take off and then climb. And good grief, there's a chart for that. The chart's shown on the right. And all of the charts in the F5 manual work in a very similar way, that you kind of look along, you find a line, you drop down, find another line, and then read across, and that's your answer. There's slight variations on that, but that's essentially what we're doing. And you can see what I've done here in terms of that yellowy, orangey line. We're at 20,000 feet. Yeah, we're going to be cruising at 10,000. We're going to drop down to the drag index, which is 102, and then read across. I'm going to ignore temperature for the minute. Yeah, and we come up with about 380 pounds fuel used. And there are charts for both military and maximum thrust, so you can take whichever one you want. So we're going to assume 380 pounds to climb out from our takeoff. So that's the first number. Okay, the next thing is to find out actually how much fuel we're going to use for the distance that we travel. Again, this is very simple. I'm just saying at the minute it's 10,000 feet, Mach 0.6. You might want to get more complex. You might want to calculate each leg. You might make assumptions over your bingo recovery speed and your bingo recovery altitude. But for the minute, for the purposes of this, to give you an idea of what to do, this will probably do. So here again, you take the aircraft gross weight, you read across to your altitude, which is 10,000 feet. You then drop down, and this is slightly strange. You drop down to this thing called baseline, which is marked, which is this line here, and then you've got to read back following one of these contours to your indicated Mach number. That is a bit strange. So you read across 10,000 feet, drop down to the baseline, and then wherever you insert that baseline, you then follow the closest contour. So if we were down here, let's say, then we would follow that contour up along and round to, let's say, Mach 0.9, and let's say we'll be there. So so that's how it works. You follow those numbers around. Once you've got that, you then read across on that level. You've then got to do another section, which is you read from the indicated Mach number here to the drag index and drop down. And where both of these intersect, which is where this circle is your reference number. Yeah. So quick recap: along, altitude, drop down, baseline, move back along the contour. Remember that to your indicated Mach number, and then you've got that horizontal. And then on this chart, you say indicated Mach number to our drag index, which is 102, drop down and find the reference number where both of those intersect. And that's about a reference number of 4. Again, the 4 doesn't mean anything per se. You need it in other calculations, and particularly within working out fuel. And again, it's just a way that you can simplify the fuel planning, because it's actually quite a difficult problem to solve. And of course, unless you've got a computer sitting there, which you wouldn't have done in the 70s, it's going to be pretty difficult to calculate. So you get a reference number and you get a reference number 4, and that's what you need to remember for the next bit. Okay, the next bit is actually finding out what your fuel burn is. So we're going to go at Mach 0.6, we read across to the reference number now, which is 4. We come up and then move across to here, and then we've got 0.1, and that's our reference number. So we're going to use for every nautical mile per pound is 0.1. Yeah, so that means that for every nautical mile we go, we're going to burn about 9.1 pounds of fuel, and that is the number that we can now plug in. So we've got the basic numbers, we've got the climb out number, and then we've worked out what our fuel is going to be for the fuel burn. Okay, and then we just add them up. So we've got taxi, we've got a climb, we've got a furthest distance from the airbase. So that was our bingo, if you remember. And if we're assuming 0.1 nautical miles per pound, it's going to take us 650 pounds to bingo. And then let's assume that we want to land with 1,000. The manual assumes that you want to land with 600, or suggests you land with 600. So we've got another 400 pounds for a divert, or for going around, for landing, whatever. Okay, so that's that. And that gives us our bingo. We just add those numbers up. Yeah, because 3 is our bingo distance. We worked out our combat fuel before, which is 948. So that means that our total joker is 3,032, which is roughly 3,000. So it means that if we're in a combat and we get to £3,000, it means we've got to disengage and return home, otherwise we won't make it. And so that's just 5, which is your bingo fuel, plus your joker fuel, your combat fuel, which is 6, gives you joker. And then we can work out how much fuel it takes to actually go through the route itself. We're going to go 100 miles, so it's £909. So it means that the total fuel needed is going to be the taxi, plus the climb, plus the landing reserve, and then our total fuel needed, which is 909. So we can get through about £2,343 is what we need. And then the expected fuel used. So remember, we're going to be landing with an extra reserve of 1,000. So our expected fuel is 1,343. So if we've got an F-5 fuel of 4,511, and we're going to get through 1,343, we should be over Tonopah test range at 3,843. And that will be a good enough number to work to. And so let's see. Let's go and look at the jet, and let's go and see whether we do land with or get over Tonopah test range with £3,383. So here we are in the F5, just at Nellis. End of runway 21 for the test flight up to Tonopah test range. This has got the centerline tank on and the Mark 82 Snake Eyes, and also the AIM-9s. And to be honest, it is not a desperately interesting video. It's me trying to keep 10,000 feet, Mach 0.6 all the way up to the Tonopah test range. So I think we can probably accelerate, and you won't miss anything much, apart from me launching, flying out, picking up the Fighter 6 departure. Great. Really not much to see. The interesting thing, of course, is when we start getting to Tonopah test range, which is about now. It's just a nice outside view. So Tonopah test range, and then that's us. So about a mile away, you'll see the radial. As we go over the radial, the tack and needle move over just on the left. And then let's look at our fuel. What's that? Well, it's about £3,900, which isn't at all far off from what we calculated. So £3,900 gives us a difference of £57 from what we expected, which is not too bad, really not too shoddy. I'll probably do well for, as they say, government work. And that's it. So it's not too bad. It's worth talking a little bit about why there might be some differences. And these are the main reasons. I mean, we took off the reheat, we didn't really calculate for that. Taxi length was shorter than we'd anticipated. Slight differences to flight plan. That's going to make you more or less. Depends exactly how well I flew that 10,000 feet, 0.6. Reasonably accurate, but still out by probably 100, perhaps 150 feet each way. Temperature is modelled within DCS, and we didn't really take into account any form of temperature, so that's in there. And also, one of the things that is a common problem, more so actually with rockets, but that's another story. As fuel is used, then jets become lighter. So all the way through that, then our gross rate is changing, so actually becomes slightly more efficient. That we haven't taken into account. And then, of course, finally, this is a simulation; it's not real. There's going to be differences between what DCS think and what DCS have modelled, and then what the figures show. Again, just for point of note, the numbers for these are normally found by test pilots when they're building the jet, and also there's always differences between airframes and the actual engine itself. So things are never quite as perfect. So that gives a good indication of how to plan for fuel. There are, of course, other things out there within those manuals and with those charts. And one of the things that I've seen often on the forums is around things like trim and how you calculate trim. And for this you need something called mean aerodynamic chord. And so it's worth looking at a little bit about how that is calculated. And there's kind of a pictorial description of what the mean aerodynamic chord is. In detail, the mean aerodynamic chord, or the MAC, is really just a two-dimensional representation of the whole wing. And what it enables you to do is, certainly for swept wings, make some gross assumptions for modelling. And that's useful in an awful case. Very mathematically, it's given by that integral down there, where essentially what you're doing is you're slicing the wing up horizontally and then adding up all of those various slices that you make and then finding the area. Why is it useful? It's useful because of trim, as we've already discussed. So that's a rendition of the trim table there. And trim is actually, and Mac generally is actually a percent, and it's really where that centre of pressure is. Sorry, not centre of pressure, the centre of gravity or centre of mass is along that wing. And 0% is right at the front edge, and 100% at the trailing edge. Again, the chord is the line across that aerofoil section. Just make sure I mention that. It's really between the front stagnation point and the point where the airflow leaves the wing. But essentially, it's from the front of the wing to the back, and that distance is the chord. So it's useful. It's useful calculating trim, and there's other things that come up. It's a bit of an interesting way in which you go about calculating it. Again, it's graphical, and you've got to follow a path along this chart. You start at the index point, and then the first thing that you do is you look at your outboard pylons, and so you go along to the weight of the outboard pylons. Now, in our case that we had, essentially outboard pylons were 0, it's like 270 pounds. So it's kind of down there somewhere. You then follow the inboard pylon up, and that's about £1,300 in total. So you follow the inboard pylons up, and that takes us to about there. And then you follow the centerline pylon, which is this 3, and you follow that line down, until you get to your cumulative weight, and that's about £2,000, I seem to remember. You can then drop down. We don't have ballast within DCS, so we can ignore. You add on a little bit for the launch rail, and then as you come down, you then add on the amount or you subtract actually the amount for the ammunition. And if you think about really what you're doing and thinking about balancing the F5 on a finger, then as you're entering the stores, you're either going to tip the nose down or you're going to tip the tail down, and that's really what we're doing. So as we go down this, and what is it, 1,300 down here to 2,000, we have a MAC of about 18.75. So you kind of put that in. What you then do is you then drop down, you add a little bit extra, it's about another 0.5% or so for the launcher rails that we've got on, and then we subtract about 4.25% for the fact that we've got 4 rounds, and that gives you the MAC of 15%, and that means that your takeoff trim would be 7 if you go back to the original table. And that's useful. If you're carrying a bit of interesting and different loads, it can be useful to know what the trim is rather than kind of just dialing it in and hoping. So I hope that's helped. What we looked at calculating fuel, looked at calculating the MAC, and demonstrated that the fuel does seem to match pretty accurately to the numbers in the manual. Again, any comments or questions, please put them in comments below. And until next time, thanks guys for watching.